So in this session today, we're going to explore why it's important to have accessible documents and presentations, and how can we use Microsoft Word and PowerPoint to make our documents more accessible, as well as our presentations. And with that, Jennifer, could you please move on to the next slide? We'll start with Microsoft Word, and Jennifer's going to go over a little introduction there.
Okay. With Microsoft Word, there's a number of things that we can do to make the documents more accessible. And one of the things is font. So we're going to start right off the bat. In the chat, can everybody tell me which font, A, B, or C, they find more accessible? Yeah. So believe it or not, all three of those fonts are the exact same size. And as you can see, that Arial font that's in the middle definitely makes it a whole lot easier to read for, for anyone that has vision. So the two other fonts that are on the other sides, one is got a lot of loops and tails, and we want to avoid that. And the other is almost like an attempt at handwriting, and that is not ideal either. All right, again, color contrast is a big one that we want to take into consideration. So again, out of the three samples that are provided, the light gray, the automatic black, or the red and green combination, yeah, you guys have it. It's definitely the B is definitely more visible. Red-green color combination in the C is going to be difficult for anybody who has red-green color blindness to even distinguish if you were trying to set that apart. So the backbone of our structure is layout. And right
Jennifer,
now, oh, sorry.
sorry, sorry, I just had a quick question about the red green.
Yeah.
Does that mean also that red, I know you would have difficulty distinguishing if you had red green color blindness. Is red text in general a challenge for anyone with color blindness?
I believe it's one of those. Let me get back to you on that because I'm
Yeah,
pretty
sure.
sure.
And even
But
as
Joyce,
yeah,
I'm just
ma-
making a note here and I will
that's
get
super.
back to you on that. It's one of those, I admit that I am still learning. And so when a question comes up, I am all for answering. Although Hollis has
Super.
their hand up. Hollis?
Yeah, I can speak to this very quickly just because my partner is colorblind and we have talked about this as an accessibility need. Um, my partner, it's not that the color red cannot be seen. It's not that you can't see like the darkness or the hue. So they might be able to see a dark red text on a white background, but they're not going to be able to distinguish it in terms of um, any information that's being given when it's like a red versus a green to be like a no versus a yes. That is information that's totally inaccessible to them. As well as it's hard to distinguish like gradients of red sometimes.
Yeah, I'm
So
also red-green colorblind, and on occasion I find I just can't see red text against black text at all.
yeah,
Um, so I don't make the distinction. So the purpose of making it red is lost on me.
Oh, your mic is off, Joyce.
Good thing my camera was on. So if you're and I talk with my hands. So so if you're trying to communicate a difference or signaling something with the color being there, yeah, that could be a challenge. Okay, I get that. Thank you. Thank you.
And
absolutely.
thank you for the people with firsthand knowledge for jumping in. I always appreciate that. With the next block of text, you'll see that it is just literally a block of text. And so if you can imagine all the documents that you ever get were like this, it makes it really hard to understand what's going on or to quickly figure out. If you use a screen reader and you have not distinguished anything with any kind of a style, unfortunately, this is kind of what it looks like or would look like for a screen reader, that just big block of text. So Adding paragraphs, of course, we usually do that, but we can take steps beyond just adding the paragraphs. In this, you'll see that we've used headers, we've used subheaders, we've used bullets, and using those correctly really helps people that use screen readers. And you'll notice down here that on my accessibility checker, it says good to go. So the previous one, the big block of text though, also said good to go. So it's one of those with accessibility checkers, we just need to make sure that we know what we're supposed to be looking for. Links. How many times have you seen click here or multiple times on a page? Really hard to figure out if you're using a screen reader where that link is going to. So by using the text SS Atlantic Interpretive Center, we know where we're going to, whereas this one is actually going to SMU, but without clicking on it, we would have little idea. So, the more descriptive without going overboard that we can make links, the better. So just having center, for example, here would not work well, but having the SS Atlantic Interpretive Center does. Alt text. Oh, Joyce, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, just so will a screen reader identify that that is a link as well as reading the text to say what it is?
Yes.
So yeah, okay. I need more experience with those. Thanks.
No worries. Alt text. So alt text is something that we add to images so that it makes sense to somebody who cannot see the visual content. So here we have our friend, a cat sitting in front of a building, but we all know that that really isn't just a cat sitting in front of a building. That's Carlton sitting in front of the atrium. So context is everything for alt text. Cat sitting in front of a building isn't incorrect, but for us here, identifying Carlton is probably more along the lines of what we're interested in doing, or if it was a link, or so explain why you're adding images. Using plain text is really important. So I have an example here of a very complicated sentence. Sorry, I'm going to just hit cancel on that phone that's ringing in the background and disturbing me. So there's two samples there. Which one would you prefer to see when you're in your writing or if you're reading something? I know I'd rather have the please submit your assignment on the 3rd floor mailbox. So we want to try and keep it as clear and use as the minimum amount of jargon that we have to. And if we do use words that are knowledgeable in the area the field that we're talking about, but not maybe to everyone, we do want to explain what those are. Tables. So with tables, we want to try and avoid the empty cells here. And I don't know if you can see where my cursor is moving. I'm hoping, yes, thank you for the head nods. We want to try and avoid those empty cells. So here we have two tables that say the exact same thing. The second one would be easier for a screen reader to read because screen readers don't know what to do with the empty cells or merge cells. They find very difficult. The other thing that we want to do with tables, just like our alt text for images, is we want to include alt text in with a title for our table and something that describes what's actually in the table. So for this example, we have in the fall, there are 10 students in 14 courses. In the winter, there are 20 students enrolled in 17 courses. And in the spring, summer, there are 5 students enrolled in 3 courses. So you want to give a description of what's happening in that table. All right, and we do indicate the other thing that I just quickly glossed over. This is a header row and this is a header column so that it can be distinguished. Joyce,
How does the screen reader read the table? Does it read it by column and row, or does it reads the alt text? So
If you have the alt text, it can be read either way. If you just have the table there without adding the description, then it would try and read it, cell by cell by cell, going, along the
isn't going
top
just
row
so
and then the
great, yeah.
next row. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
okay.
it does make it a little more difficult to understand what's going on. You lose some of the context often.
Okay, so that's really important. Yeah, thank you.
They're quite the screen reader is quite configurable, Joyce, so that the user will often decide whether they want to read row by row across or down the rows. If you've got a skilled screen reader user, they're not going to have a problem with blanks because it will tell
Right.
you this is a blank cell, but it's
But
entirely
there's
dependent on the skill level of the screen reader user.
Yeah. Super, thanks.
And having that blank cell, blank cell, blank cell does sort of detract from the message usually as well. So we do want to try and avoid that in Word. In Word, there is also an immersive reader, and I'm not sure how many of you have tried the immersive reader, but it allows you to do things like set the width of the column that you want to read. It allows you to say, I want to focus one line at a time or 3 lines at a time. It allows you to switch the font size so that it works for you and the font font family as well, I believe. And it also will read it aloud to you. So you can have any of your Word documents read aloud that way. Or you can have read aloud that's under the review tab. There is also, I'm just trying to, it's one of those, okay, this is my eyes. I'm going, okay, need to get closer. So in here, you will see that you can have it read aloud as well, right here. And that will read the text to you. And I don't know about you, but during COVID, as we were in meetings all day and on computers all day, having that option to have something read to me every once in a while was very nice. And my eyes thanked me for it. All right, I'm going to stop sharing at this point and pass it over to my co-presenters for a demo.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'll be covering the Word section, so just let me share my screen. Okay. Bear with me a second as I move all the cameras around on my single laptop screen. If I do start lagging or something, can someone please just interrupt me and I can try turning off my camera to see if that makes a difference. So what I'm going to go over is what Jennifer said through the Word review. And what we have here is just a course outline document that we made. It gives some instructors information. It has some red text, some underlining, some bolded text. It has different sort of chapters or categories trying to break things up. It has some pictures. It has some highlighting, some all cap text. It also has some different tables. So in this case, what's happening on week 1 in the course and so on. It has a grading scheme. It has another table. It also has more important things that might be found in a course outline with links or what is expected of students. So what we're going to do is we're going to slowly go through most of this document and see if we can make it more accessible. So the first thing I want to do is just bring up the accessibility panel just so we can see what we're working with. Currently it is running in the background on my machine and it says down here on the bottom bar, Accessibility Investigate. So if we go to the Review tab, and we click on the Check Accessibility button, it's going to show us here that we have some errors. So we're missing a table header. We're using merged or split cells. We have a hard to read contrast. So that would be our red on white background. And it is also telling us to review our alt text that was generated. And we want to always have this box checked showing keep accessibility checker running while I work. So I'm going to close this for now. And I'm going to go back to the Home tab in Word, and let's go through and edit some of the document. So the first thing here is we have our title. That should be a heading level 1. So I'm going to just highlight that, and under styles here, you have different headers. We can expand that, and you have all sorts of different types of styles. The normal default configuration in Word is for it to be Calibri font in sort of a light blue. You can always right-click these and select Modify and change the font and the color to what you desire. So I'm going to set this as a heading level 1, and it's going to move it to the left. So we want to try and make our text left justified as much as possible. If I bring up the navigation pane, so we're going to go to View, and I'm going to go under the Show group and select the navigation pane. And if I go to the headings on the left, you can see our first heading is showing up as a way to navigate through the document. So we'll go through and we'll set up all the headers so that it's easy to jump around in the document, and also allows screen readers to go through the document. If there are questions in the chat, Jennifer Hollis, could you please let me know, since I am just working on one monitor?
We will.
Thank you. So going down, let's just set all our headers quickly. So I know that our course description, that should be our heading level 2. Required materials, that's another level 2 heading. Our course content and lecture schedule is another level 2. Our grading is another one. Our final grades. Our later missed work. We're just going through and making sure everything, or all of our documents, have categories, which makes it easier to jump through because you can jump through to different sections. The next thing we want to look at here is we have all this course information that's important to students, or it's sort of not under any heading. So maybe this would be better in this case for this to be general information. And we can set that to a heading level 2. So it just sort of organizes the document better. We see here under class, we have Mondays and Wednesdays, that's in red font. Let's make that in black font to make it more accessible. And what we can do, yes?
Sorry to interrupt. There is one question. Joyce is wondering, you don't have to highlight the whole phrase to set the heading style on a line.
Right. You don't have to. You can just click anywhere on that line and set your header.
Thank you.
I'm just going to use some bolding to create emphasis. So when instead of using color, you can bold your text to create emphasis. You shouldn't use abbreviations unless they've been mentioned before. So like T and R, I'm not sure what that means. In this example, it's Tuesday and Thursday. And underlining, we want to leave underlining for links. So I will remove that. Continuing through, we have some more color here creating emphasis. We'd rather have that as bolden. So I'm just going to change that to black. Under required materials here, we have another text paragraph. We're getting rid of our underline. We're leaving underline for links only. And we're getting to our first image. So we want to check to make sure the alt text is appropriate for us. So I'm going to click on the image, and you can do this a few different ways. You can go to picture format and click on alt text. And what Word did in newer versions of Word, it tries to automatically generate your alternative text for the photo that is seized using AI, but it's always good to double check and adjust this because it's not always perfect. In this case, a more descriptive version could be it's a textbook of technology, just something more descriptive than what the alt text was generated by Word with. So I'm going to close that and we will continue moving down. So this is another thing that you might see is creating emphasis through highlighting and using all caps for your information. It's better here to get rid of the highlighting.
Justin, while you're doing that, I'm going to
Yeah.
just mention that there is one more question.
Yeah.
And the text says, I see that you used heading 1 for the title. Is there a difference if one were to select the title for the title?
I'm not sure on the accessibility side on if it's better to use the title style for that or not. Just mainly what I've seen when I've been looking through accessibility is they're usually using a heading 1. Hollis or Jennifer, are you able to comment on that?
The title is usually the title of the document, whereas the heading 1 could be a different heading. So the title does not appear in the table of contents. So if you were dividing something up, for example, if heading 1 was, for example, in our presentation Word, and then there were all the subcategories under it, Microsoft could be heading 1 is the PowerPoint could also be a 1, and then you could have the different titles under it. So title is important, particularly if you are exporting to PDF, but it won't show in the table of contents is my understanding.
Perfect. So in that instance, you can use title and then these heading level 2s could be heading level 1s. Perfect. Thank you for that question. So the next thing we want to check at is tables. So for this information, a screen reader will read this from left to right and go row by row. If we click on our table, to make this more accessible, you can go to your table design and you want to make sure that you have your header row selected. That will tell your screen reader that this is the heading row of the table. The other question you could do is, does this information need to be in a table? Maybe it'd be better off if you had it as a subheading and you had week 1 with your information underneath it. And then you could go through and maybe make these a subheading or a heading 3 in this case of the document to show that it's within the course content and lecture schedule. Another thing with tables is, like Jennifer showed, is we want to make sure our table properties are correct. So if we were to right click our table and go down to table properties, you're at your table property window. If you go over to the last tab, alt text, you could add a title to this. And then you would want to add your description. So, week 1, and so on, and continue your description. Alternatively, if we continue going down, we have another more complicated table here where we have the final grades and what students may get. And we have this rating column here, and these are merged cells. So this is relatively difficult for a screen reader to read because it would start reading from left to right. So it's A+, it's this many grade points, this percentage, the rating is excellent. But when it drops down to the next one, it would say A is a 4, it's this percentage points, but then this cell is blank to a screen reader. It won't read that or recognize that it is in the merge cell. Excellent. So you have a few options you could do to make this table more accessible. You could go up to your table, your layout. You could split these cells. So it's actually should be like this, and then you can write in what it is. Alternatively, instead of repeating information like this, you could do a little summary of the table or add that into the table properties that I showed earlier. Or you could redesign the table. Maybe an excellent grade is actually this part of the table. See if I can copy it correctly. And then the good grades would be so you just really want to be aware of what you are putting in your table and how best to bring out the information to make it easier. So we want to get rid of the merged or split cells. And to do that, you could include a summary. You could split the table up into smaller, easier to digest tables, something like that. The next thing I want to cover is just some links. So here in these paragraphs, we have some links and some underline. We're removing the underline and replacing it with bolding to create emphasis. And we see that we have this link here. I'm going to copy that link and I'm going to put it in this other piece that is bolded because this is the name of the document or the name that the web page takes you to. So I'm going to right click that, click on link. It's going to bring you to insert the link. So in the address box, you want to put in the URL to the file. And you can also change the text to display up at the top here. When I click OK, we can see that it now changes to a hyperlink. It's more descriptive than just having the URL in the text. And then you can clean up the paragraph, and you can do a similar thing with this block of text as the URL on the bottom of the page. We know that we're referring here to the academic regulation. I'm going to go link. I'm going to paste the URL in the address field and click OK. So with that, we covered using the navigation plane, setting your styles, using the accessibility checker under the review tab. So we solved a few things now. There's still the merge cells from the other table. If we get rid of that table, it lets me here. We can see that our accessibility is clearing up. We can fix this further by using our header row. And then our hard to read text is just our red text here. So let's make that black. We want to get rid of any highlighting. You can clean up the links further, but once you do have the accessibility checker, everything worked right, it will say your accessibility is good to go and you have no additional accessibility concerns, but we do know we do because we're still using underlining up here. We still have non-descriptive links or URLs inserted in the text. So the last few things to cover that Jennifer touched on is the immersive reader. So to access the immersive reader, you can go to the View tab along the ribbon bar, and you can select the immersive reader. So this right here, if I close the navigation pane, you can see we have a black page color with white text. So you can change how much your column width is. So you can make it narrow, you can make it wide or moderate. You can change the page color and select different colors by using the page color drop-down. You can change your line focus from none to maybe one line at a time, and you can navigate through. You can change your text spacing, so you can have it normal like it is in the document, or increase spacing. You can also view syllables of words, so it will break it apart. Like for expected here, you have expected. You can also access read aloud from here. But if I close Immersive Reader, you can also view read aloud from the review pane. I don't believe I shared my screen with audio, but if you click it and it will start reading to you. You get a little pop-up here in the right hand corner. If you click the speaker icon with the gear, also known as settings, you can change your reading speed and your voice selection. So you have a couple different voices you can choose from. And to close out of read aloud, you can click stop.
Justin,
Yes.
Joyce raises an interesting question in the chat of the citations for scholarly work, which include things like italics. They include lots of other things that you've told us are no-nos, like underlining of titles. And any thoughts on how to approach citation? I mean, citation is at this stage a fixed format. If
Yes.
you're doing APA, you're doing it the way you're supposed to be doing it, whether
Exactly.
it has accessibility issues or not.
Yes, I don't think I have an answer for that, because when it comes to if you're submitting a paper for the journal, it's up to the journal to, like, you have to use the format of the journal, or for submitting works. I don't think I have an answer on that. I would continue using the format for whatever you're submitting. So if you're submitting to a journal that uses APA, I would say that. If you're creating more a document for students or for faculty or staff, then maybe depending what you're doing, it can be more lenient. I don't know if Jennifer Hollis have anything to add on to that.
I can also see that Joyce has her hand up, so if she wants to talk first, then I could try.
Sure. I was just going to clarify that your example is a syllabus outline.
Yes.
And it's really common to put in a list of required readings or recommended readings, and you would want to show the correct formatting. So it's an
Yes.
immediate issue. So I hope someone's working on that in the screen reader universe.
It's one of
or in the
those-
citation
Yeah.
universe. Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think the citation ones are the ones that are going to have to catch up with the accessibility part. And
I
I
agree.
know that, there are styles that we do need to maintain. In a course syllabus, I think what I would do for the ease, because there you want to make sure that whether it's APA or not, you could just say, I'm including this. It is not in the format, or have it in both, so that you can say, there's an index if you require not in APA format, or vice versa, so that you show both. I think that's unfortunately where we are at this point.
Yeah, and I'll jump in as somebody who uses a screen reader and APA almost daily. Typically, a screen reader will not have an issue reading out italic text unless it is coming from something that has been put through what's called an OCR process, which is an object character recognition. So if I'm looking at something that is a PDF that is poorly scanned, that I'm having to put through OCR myself, it will very frequently cause an issue for italics. So this is just something where the APA format doesn't work terribly well. That said, as long as it is an accessible document and it's listed as text, that cuts out a lot of issues as well. But this is definitely something where the rigidity of a lot of citation styles are, unfortunately, they're just very inaccessible. They're also so content heavy that it can be really hard for people to parse them, even if they're fully sighted, don't have dyslexia, don't use a screen reader. They're a tricky thing to make accessible to a standard user, let alone somebody with issues with access.
That would be really interesting to figure out a way that Word could, that you could have something in the background that the screen reader could interpret, because it's not like all those tricky things actually communicate meaning about the
Yeah.
object. So yeah, that's a real interesting problem. Yeah.
Thanks.
Thanks.
And I'm pretty attached to APA because it's one of the more accessible ones. The ones that have underlining, I find to be uniquely challenging. Is also that familiarity will breed a certain amount of security with being able to parse all of that too.
Expertise. This is an easy problem
Yes.
for AI to solve. And Joyce is quite right. The whole idea behind a citation is that there's a whole bunch of information encoded there about, what's the volume in issue, what are the page numbers, what year was this, was this document written, and all of that's having that there and consistent is, has been a critical reason for sites. But you're quite right. Even for fully able users, citations are quite a bit to digest. But an artificial intelligence would very easily tell you, this is such and such a volume and such, this means page number. It's an automation problem we just haven't solved yet.
And I think the italics part is probably more difficult for somebody who has dyslexia or one of the reading challenge, reading is an issue, sorry. And if they're able to switch to, say, like the dyslexic font. So if you're putting out your Word document in such a way that they can transfer it to a font that works for them, then that eliminates some of those problems.
We should fix this, Peter.
Perfect. Just one last thing to show, and that is dictate. So if you go back to the home ribbon tab and you click on dictate here under voice, it's on the right hand side. Let me just click somewhere so we can see what that is like. If you click on dictate, it's essentially speech to text. So it will start listening to you. You have this pop up on the right hand side, and then it will try its best to interpret what you're saying and put it into text. So it's a way that can.
I'm sorry. Does that require a great deal of training the way it used to in the old days?
I don't think. I think it's
No.
using AI in the background. It's not perfect. It's depending how
Yep.
you pause or if you're saying a word more than once. But I used it a little bit over the last few days. Like I could pause and it would put a period, or I could say period and then it would put a period and then move on and continue the sentence. So it's just
Super.
Yeah, it
Thank
can be a
you.
way that makes it a little more accessible for people that want to maybe talk instead of type or something like that.
It definitely has come a long way. It's pretty good right now.
Yeah. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and pass it back to Jennifer.
Give me one moment to slide across here and find where we are. There we go. And you should now see the PowerPoint slide, hopefully. Okay. Excuse me, sorry. PowerPoint and Word, because they're both in that Microsoft Office suite, they're very similar in terms of how we approach them for accessibility. Some general things that you want to consider are making the font large, keeping white space, sans serif fonts, so something along the Arial line, color contrast. we definitely want to make sure that the color contrast is clear and easy to read. Tables and graphs, the same type of thing that we described in the previous section. We want to make sure that they are explained, and alt text is still required for images. Some new things that we need to consider are reading order. And so when you put an object on a slide, it is assigned an order based on when you put it on. So if you start moving content around, it's not recognizing that. So the reading order becomes an issue. Slides need to have unique names so that somebody can go through and find the appropriate slide. Layouts, we strongly encourage that you use layouts. So try and avoid the adding boxes and adding that type of thing, but choose a layout that works for the content that you want to include. Try to limit let's try that word again. Animations. So if it's not necessary, we don't want things like flying across the screen and that type of thing. And then if you have stuff that goes all the way right down to the bottom and you're presenting, we want to, that means that the closed captioning could be laying right on top, or if you're using PowerPoint Live and you've got the pop out, you want to make sure that where you are in the picture is not covering some of the slide content. And with that, it is PowerPoint demo time, and I will hand it over to Hollis.
So can I get a nod somewhere to make sure that I'm actually showing my screen there?
Yeah, you've got your PowerPoint up now.
Perfect. So I'm going to walk us through a couple of the PowerPoint specific issues. Just to begin, you can already see on our first slide that this is very definitely not a sans serif font. We've got some looping handwriting fonts as well. And if you see stuff like this, you can fix it very similarly to the way that you do in Word. So we're just going to go down, we'll find an Arial font, and we'll flip it to an Arial, and that's much clearer. And I'm not going to take too much time going over everything that we do in Word, but most of the same basic features can be found along the Home tab. Now, as we're getting into accessibility, I also have it running down at the bottom, and you can open the panel from down there as well, but you can also open it from the Review tab up at the top and just click Check Accessibility. So you can see we've already got a couple of issues with this particular presentation. To begin, I'm going to move on to our next slide. And this is actually the one that is missing the slide title. So as Jennifer mentioned, every slide needs a unique title. And if we click on this, it's going to open up an area that we can actually add a title. So it's already got it pre-selected with our issue. This is actually a pretty intuitive way to do it. And we can just add, say that this is the agenda slide. The other issue going on here is our color contrast. So unfortunately, this is not something that's going to get caught by the accessibility the way that it would in Word. So going right into our accessibility tab here, you can see we've got an entire subsection of things that we can use to help fix our color. But if you expand it, the only thing it's going to give you for help is just the ability to go through a Windows PC and change the color filter on your monitor. And while that's useful, it's not actually checking to make sure that the ratio in color value is up to any particular standard. It's just going to give you an experience of what another user would be looking at. So it's not the best way to do it. It's much better to have an external color checker like the WebAIM color checker go through and make sure that your palettes all work on your background. But luckily, we can actually go through and change our font color to something that is much clearer against that background. And just going to X out of that so we can see the slides that are coming. So the next issue, and that has actually been flagged, is the fact that we are missing a table header for this very big, very bulky table. There's actually a lot of information packed into this particular table to the point where we could do an alt text, but this is also something that would probably be much better served by a summary. Just to respect our time, I'm not going to go through and just add a summary, but if you are creating a table that is this intricate, adding a summary of what you want people to get out of it is going to be fairly important. But to fix the header issue, you can go into the error that you've got in the accessibility checker. And if you click on it, you'll see that we have a recommended action. Typically, these are also very intuitive. You just use the first row as a header, and it automatically has made that the header row. So in order to fix the rest of this particular table, instead of through the accessibility, we are going to go through the table design tab.
Just one question for you, Hollis.
Yes, absolutely.
By summary, do you mean like a written summary on the slide, like a table caption, or like just like a text box under the table?
Typically, a table caption would be a good way to do that summary. There is a way to add alt text, which I'll go through, but because this is something that is so involved and has so much information in it, just providing that extra bit of clarity as to the pieces that you want people to focus on can be particularly helpful. Right. So while we're in the table design, part of the information that's being put across, which is also hard to see for a normal person, is the fact that there is color being used to give meaning. So the green here is used to identify, quarters that have really good high numbers, and red is being used to identify quarters with really low numbers. And this is something that somebody who is not sighted or is colorblind is just not going to have access to. So it would be much better to add that and that kind of information in as part of the summary.
I can't distinguish between line 1 and line 4 at all. There's no difference in color as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and I should also say I went through this to make this as inaccessible as humanly possible and did pass it through my partner to make sure it was properly colorblind.
Okay, so your partner can't distinguish it either. Yeah.
Nope, not a thing.
But the first line and the fourth line are the same, aren't they? Or am I discovering something about myself?
The first and the fourth line are the same, like very light green color.
Yes.
The one that has Q2 that we're on right there, that
Yes.
is a very light yellow, and then we've got a very light red that is the Q3.
Okay, thank you.
So if you can distinguish, and the top, the header row is supposed to be a light blue. So if you've got most of those, I would not go and talk to your optometrist, but there's online colorblind checkers.
Yes, thank you.
All right, but that's information also that you would need a legend in it, and that's just part of like table basics as well. But in order to switch it, you can go into the table design tab, and you can scroll through. Excuse me. And you can scroll through to find something that would be clearer. Let's say we'll just do something like that. And now at very least, yes.
There is a question I'm just going to add here. Wondering what is considered best practice when using alt text for images of text. I've seen mixed opinions.
Do
you want to answer that, or would you like me to?
I can start with an beginning answer, and then I think I'll let you take it away. When you're dealing with alt texts for images of text, a lot of the times if it's text that is important enough to be on the page, it's better to just have it on the page. Every once in a while, that's just not going to be possible. And depending on the context, writing it out in the alt text might be helpful. Otherwise, I think I'll let Jennifer clarify a little bit of that.
Okay. I'm going to turn my camera on just in case someone's reading lips here. Context is everything for the alt text. And so if you are trying to convey meaning, then that's what needs to be there. The fact that it's a cat may or may not be important. If it's, you're talking about superstitions and it's a black cat, the fact that it's a black cat goes into it more, like that's the important part that you want to include. But a lot of times, um, the image may be decorative, so we can add alt text so that we're including stuff. If you add a cartoon, um, explaining the cartoon so that somebody that can't physically see, or is not able to see it, um, gets the impression of what's going on. So if it's a link, make sure people know it's a link. I'm hoping that answers the question, Allison. You feel free to put on your mic if that didn't clarify anything. Okay, I'll pass it back to you, Hollis. Sorry.
Not a worry. So yeah, now that we've gone through and used a templated style of table, this is going to be one. It's typically a little bit nicer to look at. You're taking out the context of the colors and then providing that information as a summary, or in the alt text, which I'll show you now, could be the way to actually get across, which quarters were really good with the high numbers and which were not really good with the low numbers. So with the table selected, also, we do have an empty cell here. So adding something that's just like, that's not how you spell quarters, just so that there isn't just a blank cell there. So with that table selected in the accessibility tab, you're going to see an alt text option. And you can just click on that while you're going through your accessibility and be able to actually write in your alt text for a table as well. And we're going to go on to our next one, which is an incredibly jam-packed slide that is almost completely crowded with text. Just make sure, perfect. So part of the big problem with this is the fact that there has been a layout that has been added and that has been edited quite severely. So this is also our last of the warnings that has actually been selected. Oh, forgive me, it is not. I thought that this was this one, but it really should have been. So I'm going to verify the reading order. You can go through on any of the slides, or you can go through it by selecting the option up on the reading order panel. So going back to that chunky slide, you can see that our reading order actually starts with this great big paragraph of text. And that's because when somebody was going through and making this particular slide, they decided to switch around the order of the text boxes that were shown. So the very first one that was there was the title. They decided to use that as the body content. The next one up was the content placeholder. And instead, that is now being used as a title. We've also got a footer that's in here, and we've got a page number. So this is just really highlighting the fact that if you are going to be using your layouts, it is important to use them in the order that they were created. Because even if I go through and say select this and place it as the very first thing that we're going to that we're going to have read by a screen reader, that doesn't change the fact that it's still listed as the content placeholder instead of the title. And the simplest, easiest way to deal with this is not to do it in the first place. Another thing to be aware of with screen readers and just with content on the slides is that if it doesn't really need to be there, having it on the page is typically more of a distraction. For example, with the footer, we don't really need the presentation title here. So we can just go through and take that one completely out. Another thing is if, say, you've got slide numbers, these don't necessarily need to be read by a screen reader either. A good screen reader will typically be able to pull out that this is, this particular slide number. So you can typically just remove them from the order, but this is something that, say if somebody was cited and they wanted to refer back to, oh, I had a question about what you put on slide number 4, keeping it on there is probably going to be useful for those people as well. So to just remove it from the reading order entirely, you can uncheck that box and you can see it's no longer listed as part of the reading order, despite it appearing in this panel. And I'm going to go quickly through the last few because I know that we are just over our time. So this one, if you look at the reading order on this particular slide, we've got title, we've got our main text box, we've got another text box showing who said the little quotation there, and then we've got our picture. And if you click once again on the picture option in the reading order, it will actually also pull up your alt text. So you can see exactly what somebody's going to be encountering during that reading order as well. And that looks like pretty decent alt text considering the context. And we've even got the slide number turned off of the reading order. So in general, this looks like a semi-accessible slide. There's a lot of visual noise going on with most of these slides, actually. So it's not the best layout, it's not the best background for this, but for reading order, it seems good. But then if you start looking at the captions and subtitle settings, first off, you can always turn on the option that says always use subtitles so that if you are presenting with PowerPoint, it will automatically be creating those subtitles for you. But the other and the main issue with this particular slide is that if you go into the My Subtitle settings, you can see that it's actually going to be overlaid on the bottom. And this is part of what Jennifer was talking about in our introduction to this. The bottom overlay is going to cut off the main point that this slide has been included for. So you would see that the captions or the subtitles would be showing up right here. It would be obscuring content. So making sure that you've got a really intentional way of creating your slides, if indeed you have to have that those captions over the slide and at all. Because typically you can also, select putting them below the slide or putting them above the slide. And at the very last, we're going to go through just examples of very distracting transitions. You can see that it's already obscuring some info on the slides. And in the vast majority of cases, it's really not necessary and it's not providing a whole lot of value. And finally, our distracting animation. And animations, I find, are one of the biggest things because people love them in PowerPoints. And this is actually one of the bigger things that I find to be frustrating for an accessibility from an accessibility standpoint, because a lot of the times when an animation is put in, it gets activated halfway through and then the slide deck gets distributed and you end up with an object over a lot of the content that was really meant to present meaning. So this also goes into the fact that slide decks will 99% of the time, they just won't stand on their own. You need to also be providing something that is like a record of the presentation, which we do have a recording going of this now. So I see a couple of people needing to leave. That's totally fine. And yeah, make sure that if you can't get a recording, that you're providing access to all of the information that you presented in the PowerPoint and not just in PowerPoint slide deck format. And with that, I'm going to hand it back for Jennifer for a little bit of closing remarks.
Well, I know we have a number of people that have to go, and we understand that. We're going to continue this for the recording purposes and for anybody who is able to stay. All right. The other considerations that we wanted to make sure here were accessibility tools are great, but don't depend on them because as we've shown, they don't always pick up everything. Human review and intervention is required. And if you are turning things into a PDF, we ask you to remember to ask yourself, does it really have to be a PDF? Because PDFs require additional remediation and by themselves are not usually that accessible. So a Word document is far more accessible normally than a PDF would be without the correct intervention.